bank of social media lights, and I have to wait for them to all go online, and they go online on at different times. So everyone, hello, Max McGillivray from Beanstalk Global, with the illustrious Mark from AHDB, and even more illustrious Steve Dunkley from HSBC. Mark, did I just give you a new job then? You're with AHDB, not HSB. I get my companies all mixed up. Should we start again?
Know. And it's nearly the weekend, Max. Good morning, all. Welcome to the next Talking Leaders.
Excellent. So we're all lights are green. So let's start this a bit more professionally. Hello, my name is Max McGillivray from Beanstalk Global. We are with the AHDB Talking Leaders series with the illustrious Steve Dunkley, Regional Agricultural Director of HSBC Business Banking. Steve, say hello.
Morning, everyone.
And with Mark Campbell from the AHDB. Mark, say hello.
Good morning, all.
So, Mark, just give us a bit of a background for those that haven't dialed into LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, or the podcast. Give us a bit of a background as to why we've all collectively created the AHDB Talking Leaders series and dragged the likes of Steve on board, please.
So the Talking Leaders series is just a way of trying to pull people that are either connected with agriculture or from outside the industry, and just to gain a bit of insights about what they do and how they run their businesses and things like that we can hopefully pinch and nick and start sharing some insights in UK agriculture.
And Steve, thank you, Mark. And Steve, where we found it really beneficial with crikey, we must have had over a dozen really interesting people in now, Steve, is that sometimes I feel that now we got you. Sometimes I feel that we could get very stuck, very myopic within farming, and to have people from outside the sector, or people that understand the sector but also seen a bigger world that we can all learn from, is proved to be really beneficial. Mark, am I correct?
No, massively correct. And the more that we do these and the more weird and wonderful people that we end up speaking to, the more you see the synergies between the challenges and the things that people are facing from all different walks of life.
And that's why we got Steve on. So come on, in our March broadcast, we're delighted to be joined by Steve Dunkley from HSBC Business Banking, and we're going to be discussing driving growth in agriculture, strategies for success. Steve is HSBC's Regional Agriculture Director for Business Banking in the North. He's worked in the farming sector for the last 30 years, from the family farm in the Yorkshire Dales to careers in both consultancy and government. And Steve, that's what I think is so beneficial with your banking hat on, because if it's okay to nominate that, you previously had a great career, great background with AHDB. There's both of you will know these type of stories. A number of farmers I know, they get very frustrated when they have people coming on farm looking to sell a product or advise them on something, and they have no understanding of agriculture. And it's not like agriculture is running a nuclear power plant or anything that complex, but it is different. So you do have to have people that understand the nuances of it. And Steve, I'm guessing that you find that really beneficial, having that 30-year background in agriculture, and now with your role within HSBC, that you can link the two together, that you can advise farmers and also advise perhaps upstream or cross platforms within HSBC as to what the sector is doing.
Yeah, very much so. Within HSBC, we've probably got we have got a really strong, large agricultural team. There's probably 100 people within the team altogether. There's relationship managers right across the UK. I mean, my role as sort of the regional ag director in the north is north of England, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. So I've got a pretty big patch, but my role is much more about the farming side than it is about the banking side. But I came to HSBC about 6 months ago because I was impressed with how serious they took agriculture within the bank. It surprised me how big a deal it really is within the bank in terms of how much we lend into agriculture and how we work.
Yeah, and over the last, Mark, I'm sure you've seen the same thing, over the last 10, 15 years, there's been lots of new entries from a banking perspective into agriculture, because I don't know, Steve, I think they probably think it was easy pickings, but you look at the likes of HSBC and you've invested very heavily, a team of 100, and also all the events that I ever go to, there's a lot of strong representation from the HSBC. Mark, you see that as well, don't you?
Yeah, no, definitely, and thinking aloud and thinking the points you just made, that strong representation, whether it's an agricultural show or whether it's sponsoring the local fat stock show, whatever that means, that does show the commitment that they've got to our industry, which is fantastic.
And Steve, a lot has happened since we had a catch up with Mark a week ago in the world of banking. Let me just ask the question: are banks safe? What do you think, Steve?
Well, I'd like to think HSBC is safe. HSBC is safe. We have a very strong brand, and it's a very well known and trusted one. People do come to us because they know the brand, and they trust us with their savings, but also trust us as a partner to work with on their farming business. What's happened over with SVB is an interesting one. It kind of reminds us of what was happening back in 2008 a little bit, I suppose. But as HSBC, because we're a global bank, an international bank, it gives us that reach to be able to do what we've done there. But yeah, it's interesting times. I think banks are pretty safe now. When you look at how well regulated we are now, it's one thing that I suppose it hasn't surprised me, but the rules, the regulation, the actual security that's put in place around just everyday operations. Even me to send an email, I have to pick whether it's a public email or an internal email.
Really? There you go.
Yeah, it's I won't say it's taken me by surprise, but it's nice to see it's there, and it's comforting to see the level of security that's in place.
Yeah, and this whole thing about Silicon Valley Bank, you can't make it up in a way that the investors have got all their money invested in the bank. They then get pitched to by tech companies, and they then lend them the money to the tech companies. The tech companies then put it into Silicon Valley Bank, because there seems to be this fashion to be with this bank, and now none of them can get hold of it. Why didn't they just come to you in the first place, Steve? Why didn't they just bank with yourself and your colleagues at HSBC, where it's a bit more secure? Let's go for that.
Well, let's face it, with the size of the team we've got, we're open for business. So if people want to come and have a chat with us, if they don't feel safe where they are, then come and have a chat with us. But
there we go. And Steve, the only thing you can ever predict is change. What are you seeing within agricultural businesses in the current climate? Because crikey, we've all been through an interesting 2-3 years. You'll be a real litmus paper as to what you're seeing. So without divulging breaking any confidence, what are you seeing? What are you seeing within the agricultural sector that we can learn from?
I think there's probably a little bit of caution when you look at what's happening with input costs, with fertilizer prices have gone up. They've come back a bit. Some of the quotes we've been given, they start with a 4 now, which is comforting. Wow. Energy cost was massive last year in terms of the impact on some businesses, with rising energy costs in the dairy sector, pig sector, horticulture, etc. So I think there's a little bit of caution. Some sectors have had really good years last year. Obviously, we've seen dairy price at historical highs. Cereal prices were high, but that volatility is there. Things are coming back a little bit in some sectors. So I think there's a little note of caution. I think people are trying to build a bit of a buzzword, but resilience into their business. So people aren't looking to put a lot of dairy cows on, but how can they make their existing operation more efficient is probably what we're seeing.
Yeah. So Steve, here's an interesting one. About 4 or 5 years ago, in the very office I'm in, I had a head of a particular rural consultancy stating that he was very, very happily looking forward to Brexit, because the 40% of uneconomic farmers would all be turfed out, and the 60% of farmers that they all represent would gobble up all these other 40%, and they would be like pigs in the trough. Whatever they do. Can you see that farmers are getting better, are getting more efficient? Because there's always a bit of an argument that perhaps we're not as efficient as some other sectors because they'll get subsidised and so on and so. Can you see farmers are getting more efficient and more businesslike?
Yes, very much so. I would. Yeah, it's interesting having moved from AHDB to HSBC. I only ever work for companies that have acronyms of 4 letters, by the way. But yeah, it's been interesting. We work with some really progressive farmers. We probably banked around about 3,000 where we've got that one-to-one relationship managed relationship. Probably 2/3 of them borrow over £1 million, but their mindset is one around being progressive. They're looking at how they can improve their businesses. Things like diversification was a buzzword probably 20 years ago, but that's back on the agenda. People talking about how they can diversify, and by that I just mean use the resources on farm, whether it's the people or the assets, better. So yeah, there's a number of things people are looking to do as we kind of transition away from basic payment scheme. But Some of that is adding value, some of that is looking at their costs, some of that is diversifying, some of it is then looking at what schemes are available. So there's a myriad of strategies that people are using to pave their way forward. But the one thing I would say that really sticks out for me when I go and visit some of those sort of larger farming businesses that we bank is that they're very focused on the market, what they're doing within the marketplace.
So sorry, Steve. It's, I just came back from a trip filming with them in West Africa, and the business out there, it's British owned, called Blue Skies. Their mantra is people, margin, quality. And we did a really interesting broadcast last week with an amazing guy called Jed Futter, who's a retail analyst. And he's saying to a number of people who supply the retailers, if you don't want to supply the retailers because you're losing money, just say no, find something else. And actually it's positively forcing people, like you've intimated, that with fun. Steve, Mark, why are we all in business? To have fun and to make profit. And I don't think we should be ashamed of that. But also we've got to be careful that within the likes of the fresh produce sector or the milk sector, so many people choose to chase the retailer dream, and you can have huge turnover but very little margin. What did my old grain trader used to say? Profit through sanity, not volume through vanity. Mark, have you seen the same thing as Steve is intimating? I am that farmers are getting more business savvy and are concentrating on the margin.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think hugely, and the farmers that we're working with and that we see on a day-to-day basis, you can see that drive to become more efficient, and that looking into how they can maximize profitability from areas, buildings, whatever that may be. So yeah, definitely seeing that.
So Steve,
go
on, Steve.
Just a good example, I think, is what's happened within the egg sector, that kind of changing mindset of some farmers, where because the price they were receiving, didn't leave them a margin, some of them choose not to reflock, to put another flock of birds down. And they've got the asset there, they've got the building, but that shows an appreciation of the risk, the cost involved. And so some people have said, well, actually, we'll leave the sheds empty for a little while and just take the risk out of it. So it's interesting. But then obviously we saw what happened on supermarket shelves with eggs, where there was a shortage. You go in now and there's still eggs of varying sizes being sold just because they need to get eggs on the shelf. But we have seen a response. We've seen a response in terms of what price is being paid, and then the suppliers will come back. But it'll take 18 months to kind of probably see its way through, I would have thought, in terms of the balance between supply and demand.
And again, Steve, isn't that the advantage of having someone like yourself and your other 99 colleagues, that when you're going on farm and farmers are, I've always found that the better businesses are those that are worried, and because they're worried, they actually do something about it rather than being complacent. And presumably you going on farm, you can advise those farmers, those businessmen as to, right, Steve, we think we're going to do this. What's your take on it? What have you seen in the market? Do you think we're doing the right thing? How can you help us? Would I be right in that assumption that you're keen to have that sort of partnership with farmers ongoing? Yeah,
it's interesting because we would like to see ourselves as one of those trusted advisors around the table. A lot of those businesses we're working with, they're working very closely with their accountant. They've got a good solicitor. They've got a good consultant of one sort or another, agronomist, a vet, etc. So we want to be sat around the table being a trusted partner and advisor in that relationship, because they aren't just a customer. They're a client for us.
Yeah.
So you're working with them. That's why we have relationship managers, because it's a relationship. But yeah, some of the top farmers that you see out there have a really strong network of advice around them, and kind of pick and choose, not pick and choose so much, but they know that advice is good advice. That's why they bring them on board. They can provide that advice better than what maybe that farmer could do on their own. So yeah, those people that kind of know where the limitations are and bring the advice in that they need is interesting. And that's something that you see more and more as more businesses are becoming bigger, more professional in their approach, that they're bringing in those advisors.
Yeah, and just so that I didn't mean it to go this way, but it's actually worked quite well. Mark, talk about the AgriLeader Forum, because when people were leaving the AgriLeader Forum, I was really positively impressed as to their views and the commentary they were giving back to the AHDB team as to what they learned. Just wax lyrical about the AgriLeader Forum, please.
So AgriLeader Forum is an event, it's a conference where we try and bring like-minded farmers together with some excellent speakers from outside the world. But the key is that building those networks and building those relationships. People thrive off people. And what we try and do is put some great speakers to thought-provoke and get people thinking, that maybe not give them answers for their business, but also surround them with people of like-minded nature, other farmers, that they can actually bounce these ideas off and start to help build relationships and push things forward and think about stuff from a different perspective.
Because guys, I think we've probably had the same, that when we've been on courses, a lot of what you learn on the course is actually at the bar with the other participants, because everyone's got similar issues, but actually to be open and communicative about it, you can very quickly find possible solutions, because someone might have had the same problem as you, but a year in advance of yourself. Steve, just coming back to HSBC, we've got to wax lyrical about the likes of your green fund, because there's a really good interesting link there with farming and the whole renewable sector. Can you just tell us about the HSBC Green Fund, please?
Well, just to take a step back from that, obviously, net zero and the drive to net zero for many companies is high on the agenda. Obviously, with the retailers, you can see with the processors as well that's there. They're going out doing carbon audits on farms, etc. For HSBC, it's still there for us. We still want to support the industry towards net zero, and one of the tools that we've got in our armory, alongside our knowledge, is the Green Fund. It's an SME Green Fund, so there is some eligibility around it, but ultimately there's 400 million available in the fund this year.
Wow.
The incentive, the benefit to the business that applies through it is that they'll get 1% cash back on the loan on the deal. There's a whole range of projects in there that could be eligible, and I don't think we've really stretched it as far as what we could. Anything from the go-to at the moment is renewables, but conservation projects, flood mitigation projects, a whole raft of things. We can do things around min-till equipment, etc. So there's a raft of things in there, and I think we'll only end up doing more through that as we move forward through this year and the next.
Wow. Well, I got a bit frustrated yesterday listening to the budget. I haven't looked at it in too much detail, but there's this award called the Manchester Award, that for those companies or individuals that come up with cracking developments in AI, they're going to get a £1 million award. And I don't know, if it feels like we could definitely do something within agriculture. It probably won't be as impactful as an AI award, but perhaps it could be. But it's I'm probably stepping over a line here, but yeah, it would be nice to have seen in the budgets yesterday a bit more support for the agricultural sector and that whole green fund and tech development. Mark, am I barking up the wrong tree, or is that something that we should be lobbying for?
No, I think, yeah, and again, not with our political, yes, I think we should be, and I think we should be looking at these innovative ways of pushing businesses forward that actually have dual benefits.
Yeah, but then again, we've got the HSBC with a green fund, and Steve, all credit to yourself and your colleagues. I didn't realise it was as wide as machinery, flood elements to the stock standards renewable. So I presume if we just put Green Fund HSBC into Google, we'll find out more details, will we?
Yeah, very much so. You put Green Fund, SME Green Fund, HSBC, you'll find the guidance. It's real broad ranging, and it's interesting actually. There's not a farm I'd go on to that hasn't done something around renewables. I mean, some of the early stuff is like just biomass for actually drying grain. Some of the larger AED plants, but obviously the go-to in the last 12-18 months has been solar, with people putting solar panels on. So there's quite a lot of the new poultry sheds that we're supporting. The solar is just part of the build now. Wow. It's just what's done, and then other people then again looking at energy costs. They're looking at batteries alongside that, so that rather than actually sell the power into the grid at a relatively low level, can they store it and offset that electric at 30-40p a kilowatt? So there's a lot happening in that area. I was actually in a meeting yesterday with there was a like a stakeholder engagement meeting that Northern Power Grid ran, and they were looking at the energy or the network infrastructure that would be needed going forward in the northeast, and what role agriculture could play in that. So it's quite interesting when you look at their thinking and what might come going forward. There's a lot of barriers. That was part of the workshop, was to identify the barriers. Right. But, you know, it was a good workshop, and the whole piece around wind, solar, I suppose I wouldn't say they're easy, but they're the ones that we know of.
Yeah.
Where I think the next big step will come is around slurries and waste management on farm, and how you can develop, you know, biomethane and hydrogen and all those types of things. So there's a really interesting sort of development pathway there that I think has yet to really blossom. We've had AD around for a little while, but it's those added value pieces that will then take us into how that biomethane can fuel a tractor on farm, or can fuel hydrogen into a wagon or something, you know. So yeah, some exciting times ahead.
Yeah, and Steve, you look at the likes of JCB with their big drive towards hydrogen powered tractors. God, wouldn't that be amazing? You got your farm, and it's you're creating your own energy, and you stuck it into the side of your John Deere. Other tractors are available, and so you've got everything self-sustaining within the farm itself. Steve, with what you're learning, is there's also a perception that we're slightly behind other industry sectors. And with your reach within HSBC, are there any learnings that we can learn from other sectors that you've seen, that your colleagues have seen, that could help us accelerate the growth, the profitability, the sustainability within agriculture? Tell us the secret, Steve.
Okay. I don't think there's one golden bullet. I think it's marginal gains is what you hear time and time again. So people making little tweaks here and there. What's quite interesting is that if you look at what applications we get through the SME fund, it's open to any industry, but agriculture is probably doing more than anybody through there. So it shows how resourceful farmers are. I suppose they've got, you know, the land, the asset, the roof space, for example, to be able to do that more so than maybe other industries, other manufacturing companies, etc. But yeah, I don't think there's one sort of golden bullet to say we should learn this from other sectors, but yeah, I think marginal gains. I think it's interesting when you look at, you know, some companies I've been in where they've actually adopting things like lean principles, because they've got to such a size now that they're putting standard operating procedures in place on a dairy farm, etc., on a pig farm, and using lean principles. Well, they're things that we're adopting from manufacturing, you know, other industries like that, which is an interesting adoption within the industry. And as we kind of bring those in, it's building resilience into the business, building efficiency into the business.
Yeah, Steve, let's see how Mark answers this one. Mark, we've sort of talked about it before, that the best thing about running a business is employing people. The worst thing about running a business is employing people. Well, everything we sort of talked about is sort of the mechanics and the technology, but you need people. Do you think, Mark, that within UK agriculture, we could probably develop our people better in comparison to the likes of engineering or even banking? Can we learn more from those sectors to make our sectors even more efficient?
Yeah, I think definitely we can, and it's an area. We did some research, the Bridging the Gap report, in terms of development of managing people more effectively, and we just need to pay more focus into it. And like any other sector and any other industry, labour is always the first topic that a lot of people talk about. So we just need to get better at recognising that managing our people. Which I think farmers do realise that, they just don't pay much emphasis to it, because it's easy to go and plough the field or go and milk the cows, because that's the bit that we're good at, and we like to focus on the more technical elements. But it's an area that we need to focus on more on and need to develop.
How can the AHDB help on that side?
So we do have some small resources called the Labour Life Cycle, which will target some support from whether you're recruiting somebody to whether you need to sack someone because they're not relevant for that. But there's a raft of professionals that we can help lead you to that will go into that in more depth.
Yeah, and there's when's the week when we all collaborate with all the Western Company of and TIA, and because we'll have that coming up.
The third week of May, AgriLeadership Week, which has been taken over this year by TIA, which will again share some of the areas that individuals can develop from the apprentice, from the person coming into the industry, right the way up to the leader, and where there's opportunities to develop in those kind of areas.
Excellent. Steve, I've just had an interesting question on WhatsApp. With Steve, with his new role with the HSBC, would he like to be aligned to a different sector than agriculture?
Oh, no. It's the reason why I came, really, because I'm from a farming background, and I suppose my personal drive is to give back to the industry, to support the industry that I kind of came from. So, I was on a small family farm in the Yorkshire. It sounds a bit twee, doesn't it? But it was a small family farm in the Yorkshire Dales. I was a partner with my dad for a few years, but then I went off and did my degree. But I've always worked within the agricultural industry or rural industries as well. And that's the reason why I'm here. So no, I don't think I'll be jumping ship just yet. What I would say is that I get quite a lot of diversity. Farms are quite interesting businesses to work with, because they're not just producing food, they're producing energy, fibre. They've diversified into, I was on a farm the other day that had a hen party house where you let it out 20 or 30 hens who were on well, I don't know what they get up to on the hen party weekend, but anyway, that just shows the diversity that you're kind of working with. So it's interesting. That's why a lot of farmers are very entrepreneurial in their approach.
I think there's so many bits we could go at. I'm just going to give you a crazy example. There's a friend of mine. He used to be a fresh produce buyer within Sainsbury's. Did that for a number of years. He then became sales director and then MD of Red Bull in the UK. I can't stand the stuff. That's neither here nor there. And he then came back and became an MD of a big fresh produce company. And I said to him, "Why did you leave Red Bull?" And he went, "Max, you can only go to so many Formula One parties in Monaco. They get a bit boring after a while." I thought, what a crazy example. But again, it just shows the community and am I going to be jingoistic? The love that we've all got for this sector. So come on, Steve. I'm just going to push you on this one. With your experience of previously the AHDB and now the HSBC and what you're seeing, what do you think are the opportunities for UK ag over the next 5 to 10 years? It's the crystal ball question, but you're in this unique position because you've got so many sort of figuratively different TV screens of everything that you're seeing within commerce. What can we look forward to for the next 5-10 years within ag?
Okay, so I think there's still going to be a lot of change, isn't there? There's still going to be a lot of change in terms of businesses adapting to a reduced level of support. I think because the industry is resilient and is entrepreneurial in its approach in many ways, we will find a way forward as an industry. I think, again, being efficient producers, and I bring into that the whole net zero debate, will be a massive driver. And I think we do have an advantage within the UK that we can move that agenda forward maybe quicker than some countries. From a sort of consumer side, I think there's probably more that could be done just in terms of connecting with the consumer. Understand where their food comes from and supply chains adapting to that. But I think there is a bright future ahead for the industry. But there will be winners and losers in that. You've got to be honest with the kind of view on that one, I think.
Yeah, Mark, what's your view with your AHDB hat on and also your love of dairy hat on? Are you equally as positive as Steve?
Yeah, I think there's huge amounts of opportunities as we move forward. It's going to be different. Change is going to be constant, and which it always is, but it's just going to be more rapidly happening, and we just need to acclimatise to be able to managing that change, that rapid change as we move forward. But I think there's definitely opportunity. The consumer is becoming more and more intrigued about where their food's coming from and what they're eating. So yeah, it's only going to be a good thing.
Yeah. And just on that side, Steve, we're going to need farming businesses are going to need these collaborations, these partnerships. What's the best way to interact with your hopefully with your HSBC bank manager? Because if you remember when we had our catch up a week or so ago, we were talking about how farmers used to be so frightened of the bank manager, the accountant, and the solicitor. But it's sort of over that now. But you want to be presented to have relationships with farmers in a particular way. How would you like farmers to discuss potential projects with you and to create that collaboration rather than being a pain in the bum? What's the best way, please?
Yeah, it's interesting when you look at how so it was my dad actually. We managed and worked with the bank, as it were, and we didn't borrow much money at all, to be honest with you. But with businesses that we work with the HSBC, it's nice to have an open relationship. It's nice to be brought in to the discussions early if there's a conversation being had about developing the business, a land purchase, or whatever it might be, but bring us in early. And quite often it's not just us and the farmer talking, it's us, the farmer, the consultant, the accountant. So you're working as a team to get that deal done and get that through. And what's interesting, I think, around the collaboration piece is I think people are much more open to collaborating. You look at, and we've talked a lot about renewables, but there's a lot of people who, almost understand their limitations as a farm, what they can do, but will bring a technology company in and start to work with them to deliver that solution on farm. So I think that's a new area where farms will move into, just in terms of that, those slightly different joint ventures around the energy piece. We've had grain storage cooperatives and potato marketing groups for a long time, so it's not uncommon. Let's be honest, but it's a new area, new venture, and that's where there's a bit of knowledge sharing needed.
So Steve, that's really, really interesting. I've had a couple of meetings with farmers this week with my recruitment hat on, presenting shortlists, and both farmers they bumped their advisors because they had a couple of advisors coming in about other projects. So not saying that's the route that people have to go down, but do you think that's actually quite a good conduit, that if they're thinking about renewables, that they bring in a trusted advisor who will then be able to guide them, and then they'll have a bit more of a case to present to you, because we don't want to waste your time, because you don't want to, I can't think of the tire kick is the wrong expression, but we don't want to drag you or one of your colleagues on site and for us to say, oh Steve, what about this or what about that? They should have really done that deep dive with a consultant who understands it, and then they can present to you properly, and you'll say, yep, you got the groundwork doing it, we can do this, we can do that. And so there is that collaboration. You prefer to see that rather than my unprofessional phrase, that tire kicking type of conversation.
Yeah, I think it's good to see people having done their kind of feasibility study, which sounds quite formal, but it could just be that they've done preliminary research and they've got some figures and some budgets, etc., already kind of specced out. But that piece around, what's feasible, yeah, very much so. I think, we'd always want to be brought into the conversation as early as possible. Okay. Then we can be as supportive as we can, and that's where we can bring some of our knowledge and kind of our network to the table as well, to support people. Because I was in that meeting yesterday with the Northern Power Grid, and I was sat next to a farmer who was looking at various things on farm, but I had a contact for him around micro AD. So that sort of informal network, informal knowledge sharing is critical, really.
Yeah. And Mark, do you find that many farmers that you come across, either personally or with your AHDB hat on, have a strategy, have a plan, have a business plan?
Yes and no. I suppose it's fairly mixed in terms of those kind of things, but generally, yeah, people have got a bit of a strategy or business plan. I suppose to build on that, Steve, to throw it back to you, what would you, with the experiences you've had and now with your HSBC hat on, what kind of pointers, what should be in those kind of strategies and business plans to help push things forward and actually deliver that project?
I think what I tend to see is those businesses that you would say have a business plan. It's probably not written down as such, but they have a very clear vision of where they're going as a business. They've got a clear direction of travel, and yeah, they can flex and they can move within that. And that's the beauty of having a strategy. But they've got a clear vision. If you've got a clear vision, you can then bring people with you. You can paint what that future might look like, and bring staff, bring advisors, etc., along with you. I think I would say this as a bank, but knowing your numbers as well, knowing where you're going in terms of financially is key. It's key for us as a bank. Yeah, we can look back at historic performance in the accounts. That's one thing. Accounts tend to be done for tax purposes, but maybe don't look so good if you try to borrow money. But historic is fine. But what's happening in the future? Making sure, back to that feasibility, if you're looking at a new venture or where that income is going to come from, what does that look like? Have you done your research? Have you got a contract in place? So yeah, I think having a vision, knowing the numbers, working through that plan, and then looking at what I think we have touched a bit on risk as well, but knowing where the risks are and how you're going to manage some of those risks. And again, the theory behind risk management is one thing. A lot of farmers won't have a plan, as it were, but they'll take each risk as it comes, and they'll have some type of strategy to mitigate that risk in some way, shape or form. If you actually sat them down and got them to write it out, you would probably come up with a pretty good plan, but people are doing it pretty dynamically, as it were. So risks, budgets, vision.
Okay, and just to focus even more on that, the more impressive farmers that you meet them, what excites you about them? What when you step out of the car and you meet these people and you're 5-10 minutes into the conversation, and you think that these people are mustard. What can we learn from you? What that we can copy, that we can duplicate? What excites you about those sort of people?
It's their drive and ambition.
Yeah.
And the other thing that kind of came across to me when I kind of started was that they're just finishing the old project. They're in the middle of the existing project and they're thinking about the next project.
No, brilliant.
And debt, lending money, borrowing money from the bank is an enabler for them, and they're not scared by that. They actually thrive on some of that, by the need to drive the business pretty hard to repay that debt. So yeah, it's interesting when you kind of go around and you talk to people and they're talking about what they're currently doing, what they might need financing going forward. They see it as an enabler for them to drive their vision. So yeah, it's an interesting industry to be in, to see how some of those really progressive farmers are working.
Yeah, Steve, see if I can extrapolate this. We've often said on the Talking Leaders series that the better leaders are those that spend about 25% of their working time just thinking. I know that's virtually impossible within farming, but then one of my contacts who liked that, he put me onto there's a whole bunch of videos on Facebook with Warren Buffett, the serial and very successful investor. And there's a fascinating one I watched the other night when he was saying about the businesses that they buy, that the people that they're looking for aren't driven by money. When when Warren buys their business, yes, they're going to get millions and millions of pounds, but the money isn't of interest to them. They want to stay within the business, and all they want to do is knock it out of the park every single day. And that's the sort of businesses that they love and they invest in. And all farmers are like that, aren't they? And I love your example about completing one project, halfway through the next, and thinking about the next one, because that's systematic of that sort of individual, isn't it? And also the difference that they can make to UK agriculture and the UK economy by employing more people, by taking on those projects, especially if they're deploying your green fund to make a difference on the renewable side. Mark, am I crazy again, or am I on track?
No, you're definitely on track, and that innovation, that person that's just continually driving to do a better job and look for the next project and push the boundaries is definitely where we need to be going.
So Steve, what can we have quite a big audience dialed into this, of not just the farming folk, but we also have a lot of students in and out of the sector. What's your view? What's your advice as to why we should attract more people into the wacky world, the glorious world of agriculture, please?
I think it's the diversity. Every day is different, and when you actually look at what you're doing in terms of being a farmer, being a food producer, that incorporates a whole raft of different technical aspects, whether it's genetics, variety choice, whether it's back to renewables and energy again, looking at nutrient management on farm. It's a very technical industry now going forward, and having the staff within the business having the knowledge to deliver all of that and doing it effectively is really exciting. I think it's much more than maybe how it was portrayed when 30 years ago, when I was just leaving college, and if you were looking to go into farming, it was the last career option on the shelf. But not anymore. I think when you look at what the opportunities look like within the industry, and actually when you go around, and I know I've kind of been in farming and then come out and worked in allied industry, but when you look at the raft of people that's in the allied industry as well, both women and men, it's really encouraging to see that there's a lot of vibrancy there. I was up at Carlisle Dairy Expo on Saturday, which we sponsored, and again, it was really, really exciting to see the number of younger people out there attending that show and being involved on a day-to-day basis within the businesses that were showing cattle up there. So yeah, I think it's an exciting industry. What we probably need to do is sell the industry better, but that's where AHDB and TIA and others can come in terms of that.
Yeah, and also you look at the two of you've both got a farming background, and you're now, if it's the right phraseology to use, in the services sector, and it just shows the potential that if you're a 16-year-old who wants to come into agriculture, you could end up like as a Steve or a Mark. Which one would you choose? Or I'll be the tall looking one. I'll be Steve.
Yeah.
So come on, Steve, what's the one piece of advice to everyone dialed in as to what's going to make better leaders? Oh, such a big question. But what's that one piece of advice that you think is going to make people fit for purpose and really push forward for the next 5 to 10 years?
Be ambitious, have vision. No one was ever motivated by a spreadsheet. So sell that vision, sell the ambition that you've got, and people will come with you. I think there's some really good leaders out there when you go and talk to different people who are decision makers in farming businesses. They probably don't see themselves as leaders. They probably see Gareth Southgate or Prime Minister as leaders. But to drive a farming business forward now and manage 2, 3, 4, 10, 20 staff, it takes leadership skills, and that's leadership across your business, leadership across your people management, leadership across your finances. So I'd be ambitious.
Yeah, Steve, well done. Mark, with the work that we do with the YouTubers, and in effect, they're leaders, aren't they? Because they get such a following. Steve, it's fascinating when we do the live work with the YouTubers with the likes of help me, Mark, with the likes of Ollie and Joe
Steels, Charlotte.
Because Steve, the phones are alight with. Sorry, Mark. The phones are alight with people asking them questions. And all of that interaction. So perhaps this definition of leaders is also changing. We always thought it was the farm foreman 30 years ago, but I think leader, the term leader has softened now to the point of being, Steve, you're a leader within banking, or Ollie, he's a leader within social media. And as long as we're all plugged into these individuals, we can all learn from them. Mark,
we can all lead. Even the person who's just milking the cows on a day-to-day basis can lead, can show leadership, and show some sort of thought thinking in terms of how to do things differently, how to improve things. It's all leadership in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah,
just bringing it out of people.
I completely agree with that, and echo that point that we all lead and manage on a day-to-day basis, whatever our level and whatever our role. We just need people, those iconic people, the bigger leaders in the industry, and our YouTubing fraternity will be that they're just setting a bit more of a different direction and a different way of communicating and disseminating some of those key points.
Yeah,
and
again, that's hugely beneficial for the sectors as a whole. Mark, do you want to wrap up for us?
Yeah, wow. Thank you so much, Steve, for a really insightful 45 minutes there. We've covered huge amounts of ground in terms of where the industry is, in terms of that caution that people are seeing. However, you're still seeing the ambition and the vision of people trying to push forward. But a couple of the points that I've pulled back, which resonates hugely with some of the stuff that we're trying to do at HDB, is about that attitude and that mindset, and the people that have got the glass half full and the ability to look at the opportunities out of change, is something that probably farmers are very, very good at, and probably underestimate as we move forward. But it is that piece around not doing it on your own and surrounding yourself with good people, and the scary bank manager, having them involved at the beginning of a project idea and as a sounding board to understand what they're going to bring something to the party, and help you push things forward. So yeah, really, really good broadcast. And yeah, let's just.
And can I just interrupt, guys? I've just got a really nice message. So this is a contact from mine who wants to remain nameless down in the West Country. Max, can you just say a big hand up for the HSBC? We regularly communicate with them. We had a significant issue over COVID. We needed to lean on the AHBC, and if we hadn't have done, we would have been in financial dire straits. They came to the rescue and saved us, and now we're in a far better place than we were before. All credit to the HSBC. There you go.
Any combination of those four letters, yeah.
Yes, I know. HSBC, AHDB. Yeah. We all know what I mean.
The odd Freudian slip when I've been introducing myself. Yeah, I would actually. That's a really nice comment to have received in, actually, and that's another thing that's kind of taken me, that we are supportive if there is a farm in difficulty, if there is even a sector like the dairy sector that went through tough times a few years ago. That's part of the role, really, of what I do and my two colleagues in the Midlands, of Andy Hipwell and Grace O'Dwyer. It's being the eyes and ears of the industry back into the bank to support the sort of credit teams in the bank and the risk teams in the bank to actually look at what's happening in certain sectors and how do we respond, how supportive can we be. So yeah, I'm really impressed with what I've seen internally as to how we operate if there is either an individual business in difficulty or a sector. So even things like avian influenza that we've seen over the last few months, understanding what that's going to do to businesses within the bank, and we're proactively feeding that message back in. So it's not a surprise to us. We want to have a heads up on what's happening.
Yeah, Terry from East Anglia, best looking bank manager by far, Steve. I think we might stop there. This is
It's getting a bit worried now.
I'll pass on his email. I won't.
I would point out that I'm not a bank manager.
I've murdered your company name. I've murdered your title. But we all know what I mean. Go on, Steve.
Know my place. I leave the bank managing to the bank managers on the ground, and I focus on the farming side. So yeah.
So something to aspire to. Go on, Mark. Wrap up for us.
Brilliant. No, thank you, Steve. It's been a great discussion, and you've covered huge amounts of ground. And thank you for giving up your time. Just to plug for next month, we're going to talk all things social enterprise next month with the CEO of Internationally, Colin Cookson. So look forward to dialing in then. Thank you.
And just to wrap up, if I can just remove Mark, just another comment. Steve, thank you very much for your confirmation that the banking sector is generally safe. We've been a long-term client of HSBC and are looking to be for the long term. And who's that from? That's from Jeffrey in West Sussex. So there you go. Nice one to end up with. So yeah, I think the main thing I've learned from this is just to keep communicating with your bank, especially as we all want you to do. We want you to look to progress, and you need that collaboration. You need that partnership. So do not be afraid of the likes of the HSBC. They're here for the long term for you. I'm going to leave it at that. Team, well done. We'll catch up very shortly. Thank you, Steve. Thank you.